My name is Amar. I am a host on Asians Represent. I'm also a cast member on Dungeons and Asians. My pronouns are he, him. Today we're going to be doing a slightly different show. I know we took a bit of a hiatus over the last couple of months. And this time, this fell on the weekend, sort of around Eid. And a lot of us felt we didn't really have the spoons in the middle of this time of celebration to dig into some of the issues with Al-Qadim. So we're going to do a slightly different stream. We're going to talk a little bit about Eid, but mainly we're going to focus on how to integrate cultural and religious events into your tabletop role-playing games and hopefully bring up positive examples so we can have a really wonderful stream. And so I'd like to jump on over to asking everybody to introduce themselves. Mariam, please.
Yeah, hi everyone. I am Mariam. I go by they, them pronouns, and I do a lot of things, but mainly I write for tabletop games, and I podcast, and I stream. And currently, big project that I can talk about is Kahania Season 2 is happening on Utopia, where we're playing Monster of the Week. And the Musafir Season 2, it's going to happen. It is. It's going to happen.
Awesome.
Aggressively scheduling.
Look, life happened.
Izza, please jump in.
Hi, I'm Izza. My pronouns are she, her. I go by Evil Clever Dog on Twitter and Instagram and YouTube. I'm a cosplayer and designer and TTRPG streamer and Al-Qadim picker-a-parter, but not today.
Fantastic. Adam Ali, please.
Hey, my name is Adam Lee or Norden Ali, because my name has been playing a joke on everyone, I suppose. No, I have two different names and I use them for two different things. You can call me whatever you want though, just not Adam. My pronouns are he, him. It's been a while since I've been here, but it feels like, it feels like my dog. No matter how many times we bathe him or try to trim his hair, he smells exactly the same and will lick the hell out of my nostrils. So comfortable is what I'm saying.
Well, I'm not promising I'll be licking your nostrils, but it is good to have you back. Safia, please.
Hi, my name is Sophia. I am a fantasy fiction writer and I run a community that focuses on tabletop gaming within Saudi Arabia, mainly within the Eastern region. And I'm excited to be here and to do something a little bit different.
I apologize for mispronouncing your name, which is embarrassing because Safia is my mom's name too.
It's all right. I've gotten used to all sorts of pronunciations.
Oh, wow. That hit hard.
Yep.
Oh, been there.
Yeah.
I don't even notice them anymore. I'm just used to them.
I'll take anything at this point. Hey, you, tall guy over there. Yeah, okay, right off the top, I do want to give a big thank you to Adam Ali for the idea for doing a more positive stream, and I want to thank big thank you to Safia, excuse me, for coming up with sort of a general structure about some of the things we could talk about. And I also want to plug some really great work that Safia is doing with Ahmed, who used to be in the stream, but unfortunately can't make it anymore because of scheduling conflicts. Safia, do you want to plug that survey, please?
Yes, so we are working on putting together some information that will give us insights into what the tabletop gaming scene is like within the Middle East and North African region. So we have a survey that is targeted to do that. So if anyone that is a national or an expat living within the region, or anyone that identifies with the region, please take this survey and help us understand how we game.
Yeah, thank you. That's really great work that you're doing there. And the links are going to be in the show notes and in the Twitch chat and everywhere that we can push it out on all of our socials as well. On AZNS Represent, as well as on Safia's and Ahmed's Twitters, which will be plugged. Now, I understand you are also doing a stream with Izza. Do you want to plug that too? Give us some details about that.
Izza will be doing that.
Yeah, so next Saturday, the 22nd, Sophia and I are going to be streaming on Satine Phoenix's Twitch channel. She's doing a sort of all-day series of one-shots to celebrate her birthday, and Sophia and I are going to be in the 10 a.m. PDT, which is 6 p.m. BST slot, playing together with some awesome folks like Critical Bard, Fenway Jones, Lucia Searsword, and Jacob Buds from XP to Level 3. It's going to be so much fun. We were just planning some stuff about our characters before we jumped on here, and yeah, I can tell you they're going to be some very, very fun characters. So if you want to come along and join us for that, it's going to be a lot of fun.
That's fantastic. Well, that sounds like it's plenty of good news, and that's a perfect segue into the first segment we wanted to throw in there, which again, thanks to Adam Ali for the idea, is discussing some good stuff that happened over the last couple of months or 3 months or few months since we last streamed, because there wasn't a lot of good stuff, which is why we didn't end up streaming so often, but love to hear what's been going on with people. Miriam, would you mind starting us off?
Yeah, so I guess closer to more recent than further back is I got my first shot, so yay, on my birthday, and I think, when was the last time we actually, it's been a couple of months. I finished writing my stretch goal for Thirsty Sword Lesbians, and it is all there. I think we're just waiting on a couple of things before it's ready to print and give to backers and everything. But yeah, I'm so happy about that. And I've got a couple of other projects lined up that I can't really talk about right now. Stuff's happening.
Mysterious. Fantastic. That's all very positive. Issa, would you like to share some good news?
Well, I've had my first vaccine as well, so that's great, except for the fact that it knocked me out for like 10 days. Not so great, but it's worth it. Everyone get vaccinated. But I think just like on a personal level, I've had some more like momentum coming back to like actual work for me, which is really nice, because I have worked in theatre and film and all the stuff that got immediately shut down when lockdown happened. So it's been nice to have some projects like ramping up again, and paid work is nice as well, you know.
That's fantastic. I'm really glad to hear that. Adam Ali, would you like to give us some great news? What's been going on your side?
I mean, I have a lot of really cool news. It's been a couple of months of change for me. I think if you've looked at my Twitter, there's two thoughts that cross your mind. Wow, he does a lot. And two, I'm kind of concerned for his sanity. And to be fair, you should have been. I was maybe overindulging a little bit, but that's still a good thing, because it means I got to learn what I like, what I don't like. And I've gotten a lot of good opportunities been tossed my way recently. Even it's gotten to the point where like a big channel straight up, like one that gets 100 viewers regularly, straight up contacted me, said, "Hey, do you want to be on a thing?" And I just say no, because I had a conflict. But like, that's great. Even the door being opened is really cool. So wonderful things have been happening. I'm even in a Kickstarter right now. So I'm flying high. And I also had my first shot just a couple days back. All of us have had one shot at this point in this group, which is just amazing.
Oh, way to give it away.
Not gonna miss our shot.
Hey.
Well, goodbye.
Sophia, please share some great news.
Yeah, my second vaccine shot is right around the corner, so that's one awesome news, and pretty soon we'll be just done with that part of that, and happy to be done with that. And over the last couple of months, I've started out quite a few writing projects. One of them being really delving into creating a pre-Islamic Arabic campaign setting that I am hoping to completely plan out to the best of my ability, have someone take a look at, hack at it, and make sure it works out quite well, and then run it as a home game to really work it out. And hey, maybe it could go places from there if it works out and if it makes sense. So that's been a fun project for me. Aside from that, it's one thing that I was able to write for has launched. It is another tabletop game that was by Dank Dungeons called Azag, and it's a very strange, weird, magic-inspired setting that is looking at Bronze Age. So it's pretty fun, and I was able to write a short story for that.
Ooh, very interesting. I'm gonna have to look that up. And for myself, I some positive news. I did also get my first shot of the vaccine. I got it yesterday, and I have to be honest, I feel terrible. But I'm powering through, which is why I'm in a more reclined position than usual, and I'm supporting my head because if I don't do that, I get incredibly nauseous. So I hope nobody takes this to be a lack of interest. I am super engaged and super.
I've been there.
Yeah, right. I also, unlike it seems like everybody else in the world, only got like 4 or 5 hours of sleep. So everybody else has been saying they just like couldn't wake up, and I just couldn't. I just had a lot of trouble with sleep. But I am also really grateful to have gotten the vaccine, and hopefully, as sort of more of the world gets vaccinated, we will return to something like normalcy. Or well, it won't be what it was before, I think, but hopefully it'll be pretty good. Other bits of good news on a more personal level. I started a new job about a month and a half ago, my day job, and that IT, and that's going quite well. And I also, and I hope this is not TMI, I also found new antidepressants that are working amazing, because you often have to try a bunch of different ones. Back to tabletop role-playing game stuff. I am really excited about the latest episode of Dungeons & Asians, because it's one in which Waleed gets a mech, which is basically 90% of my life goal, if I can ever achieve it, is I want to drive a mech. So having one of my tabletop role-playing game characters do it is just as good, of course. And so you can find that on the Dungeons & Asians. Sorry, you can find that episode on the Asians Represent podcast stream, and I think on the YouTube channel. But we are going to jump into discussing what Eid is a little bit. So who wants to give us the 101 on Eid, and then maybe some quick bits about how you might be celebrating it or not celebrating it, because not everybody in the stream does.
I don't mind taking a little bit of a crack at it. Eid means festival. That's it. That's what I got. No.
And Mubarak means happy. So happy festival.
That's it. Bye, everyone.
That's the kind of in-depth knowledge you come to this stream.
This is what you come for.
And I have an Eid al-Adha joke, just a little bit.
I mean, to be fair, to be fair, like a lot of things named in Arabic, it's pretty self-explanatory. If you speak any amount of Arabic, right? Once you understand that Eid is a festival, you understand there's actually a lot more things that could be generally called Eid than what
like a birthday.
Like a birthday. Navroz is one of those things that's often called Eid in certain places. The two most often thought about are Eid al-Fitr and Eid al-Adha. This past one was Eid al-Fitr, and for some people, it's still being celebrated. It is the breaking of the fast. It marks the end of Ramadan, and it does not always follow. If you followed us year after year, followed a Muslim down the streets, don't do that. But if you did, you might realize that we celebrate Eid at different times over the year. Over years, and that's because we celebrate it according to the lunar calendar, not according to the Gregorian or solar calendar. So it can fall on different days.
It's 13 days shorter than the Gregorian, hence the shifting. Yep. It takes about 25 years before it comes back on the same date again.
Yeah. Specifically, it falls on the first. It falls on the first of the month for us, because Ramadan itself is not just a month of fasting and prayer. It's a literal month in the calendar. So the other Eid that's often known is Eid al-Adha. Some people call it Big Eid. I don't. Some definitely do.
Yeah, we call it Big and Small Eid.
Some people call it that, and I don't judge them. That's what the important bit is. Eid al-Adha is it's the celebrating of the willingness of Ibrahim, or Abraham for those in Abrahamic religions, to sacrifice his son. But instead,
it marks the end of Hajj as well.
Yeah, it marks the end of Hajj, and instead Abraham sacrifices a lamb. That's roughly the importance of it. It's the end of Hajj, and it's to commemorate one of the biggest like moments of sacrifice for God that was also one of the biggest moments of mercy. So again, Eid roughly just means festival. And when it comes to what Eid looks like, generally it's exactly what it sounds like. We have a good time, parties, big meals, and everything beyond.
Yeah, with us, a lot of it begins with kabsa for breakfast. So you start off very strong with food.
Now, what is kabsa?
Kabsa is a traditional rice dish cooked with often lamb or just a general meat. And it's heavy with a lot of spices. It tastes great. And right after fasting for an entire month, you wake up and have that for breakfast at 6 a.m.
Sounds about right.
Yep. Yep. I mean,
there's a so Eid al-Adha, because there's this whole sacrifice, and that's also when or at least within South Asia, and I'm sure it's also everywhere else, you have a sacrifice, and you also, there's this essentially when you sacrifice an animal, and it sounds odd, but basically you pay for an entire animal, so like a goat or a cow, and you split it into 3 parts. One part stays with you, one part goes to your immediate family and friends, and the third part goes to the poor and to help feed them. And because there's a lot of meat going around there, my sister and I like to wish each other meat mubarak.
of course you do. I can literally see you saying that right now.
Yep.
So
I just have to wait 2 more months.
Yeah. So that's actually a really good segue into, I guess, just quickly, there are some cultural differences in how Eid is celebrated from sort of region to region and sort of ethnic group to ethnic group. I was wondering if we could get some quick lowdowns about some differences, and also maybe about how you and or your family celebrate Eid, because every family has their own traditions as well.
I mean, I know in the past I've often been the one to say, hey, this is the difference between, you know, I'm a Shia Muslim, and how sometimes that practice, I don't know. I generally don't know, because for Eid, because it's so fun, I often forget that it's like there's a religious portion, you know, and I pray, but it's not like Layt al-Qadr where I'm praying a lot, and that's frankly most of my night. It's a small minority of that, and the rest of it is just me practicing a bunch of cultural traditions that come from being East African, that come from being Indian or Pakistan, whichever side of the border we originally came from, because no one can tell, and that kind of thing. So, you know, we just, there's some dandiya ras, and there's also just a lot of grilled meat.
Dandiya and Eid, that is like, oh my god.
Yeah, we're weird. We're weird.
Good weird.
That said, this is also the day where I'm gorging myself on ice cream for the 2nd time in a row. Because Layt al-Qadr, what we do is we pray several times during the night, and obviously we fasted during the day. And even though some of my family doesn't fast, I don't no longer fast because of the medication I take, we always consistently fast during Layt al-Qadr. But the moment we stop, instead of going to have dinner, we went to Dairy Queen and, you know, gorge ourselves on ice cream. And then the next break, we would have the proper meal. And that was usually like a community thing. So like you'd go to the masjid after prayer and they would already have the food set up. And then the time after that, the adults would go have coffee, and the children would just stare out into space because we were tired. Nowadays, of course, I'm an adult. So I instead have a fancy coffee with whipped cream instead of Dairy Queen, and I have another one of those for the 3rd portion. But this would be like the week where I would, for Layt al-Qadr, I would have a lot of ice cream, and then for Eid, I would insist upon having a lot of ice cream. And roughly that's my memory of Eid al-Fitr. It's just always Dairy Queen.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, for us, Eid al-Fitr, a lot of it comes with just the big breakfast in the morning, which
Mhm.
we might start off by eating normally, but a lot of times it's you go to grandma's house, especially as a kid. First thing you do is immediately go to grandma's house and you have that big heavy rice and meat dish kapsa that she's made. And then when more of the family start coming in, you're dressing up, you are wearing an outfit that you have planned from a while back, or your mother planned for you and if you're a little kid. And then a lot of it is waiting for the time when all the adults are here so that you can ask for idea and get money. And so you would, and then as kids, you'd all gather up and see who got the most money. And oh, I have a trick on how to get more idea out of her. Or no, you know what? That aunt, she doesn't know how to tell us apart. She doesn't actually know who we are. Let's go again and ask for more money. And so it's all these little devious tricks. And who can, you know what? No, I can pull off being cute a little bit more if I talk like this. So I'll just get a little bit more money out of it. And then there's candy, and there's a lot of candy. And so you would have little bags that whoever organized the gathering might have bags of candy around. And so they would sometimes be organized about it and give it to the kids. But that's no fun. Another way to go about it is instead to make games and to see who can get the most candy out of it. Recently, a lot of families I know have, to their regret, created piñatas. And that is something you will quickly regret if you gave children a way to hit things to have candy. Now, we didn't do that growing up, but it's become a trend recently. I don't know why, but candy and money has always been part of growing up with Eid. And of course, there is the more religious side. As an adult, I no longer get an idea, something that I would like to normalize getting back again.
Yeah, as an adult, that just never happens.
Now you have to give
that
it.
just for that.
Yeah, now I'm expected to be giving idea to kids that show up and look at me like.
But you know all their tricks, so
I do.
You put a little. You take a pen and mark their hand to make sure that they don't come back to you twice.
Yeah, and kids these days are not happy with a couple of riyad or equivalent of like $1 or $2. No, they want they expect at least maybe equivalent of $30 to $40 each, and it's like no, honey, no, you're going to be satisfied with your $1. Go.
Wow, inflation, huh?
Yes.
You know, it's really weird because I've back when we used to celebrate with people, I still receive it from my grandmother and sometimes from my parents, but I also have to give it. It's funny. It always seems like there's twice the number of children.
It's a trickle-down economy.
Yeah. And now, because we can't gather as much, so you don't have people with the sea of children that are coming. Instead, what's happened is local communication or teleconferencing services have offered this pretty fun app where you can give idea to people through their phone. So what you do is you make like a scratch board and people can go in and receive an idea just by clicking and finding their luck to see how much they get. So I thought that was a pretty fun way to still give idea to kids. Limit how much you want to give them without actually seeing them and having to go through the process of a lot of physical interaction.
Oh, that's wonderful. Speaking of, how have people adapted their Eid traditions to doing all this kind of stuff remotely?
I mean, there's a lot of the whole Zoom conferencing thing, but it's now I think, like, I haven't done it, but I've heard of it from extended family of kind of doing henna parties through Zoom where you just kind of do this and it's really awkward because there was like one person in the family who was actually pretty good at it, That used to be my hustle during Eid. I would make like a lot, not just Eid, but I would also make, I would be hustling during Eid doing henna for everyone, and I would like twice a year. It's like how seasonal workers have like they Etsy people, they make a lot more money during the holidays. 2 times a year, I would make a lot of money and save up doing henna for everyone. And I got pretty good at it. And then I started doing tattoos as well, aside from the traditional henna. Yeah, that's something I definitely miss. But I think in terms of COVID, yeah, we kind of just eat meals in front of each other and be like, hey, I made this. Look at this food, baby. I made.
Yeah, oh, sorry, go ahead.
On the topic of food, it hasn't happened much this time around, but we've been really like focusing on taking care of our seniors. So like I mentioned, one of the big things around Eid, and this is every single kind of festival you can imagine, is at the mosque, there's just tons of food that we just have and everyone partakes. And then they steal some and take some home, even though they're not supposed to. Our seniors especially been missing that in our community. So what happened recently is that we got a bunch of like styrofoam clamshells on sale, and we just filled them up and we took them to whatever seniors were listed on the registry, which is funny because my grandfather still was, despite the fact he died like 8 years ago. So I also got free food for Eid. That was great. But we can't interact with them, but we can like leave that food at their doorstep with like a handwritten card, talking about how much we're excited to see them again, Eid Mubarak, hope they're doing well. And through that and phone calls, I know that's silly, but seniors, that and phone calls, we've stayed relatively connected with the parts of our community that most people aren't really thinking of when it comes to like Zoom and that kind of thing, which has been like, it's been a bit of a joy. I only have one senior citizen in my family anymore, and she lives in Calgary, and I still call her very, very frequently. But to see like the other seniors in our community being like reminded that they're not alone, it's been, it reminds you sometimes that there's huge benefits to having community in, when it comes to religious gatherings, and how much you miss it when it's taken away from you, and how much we can find ways to rebuild it, even if it's not the same. Like this isn't the same, and we don't want it to be the same next year or the year after, but it's enough for now, and that's pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm. I concur, and well said. On sort of the theme of community, I guess I also wanted to share my experience as somebody who's not sort of religiously Muslim, but I tend to identify as culturally Muslim still, because that was my upbringing and so forth, where I haven't really celebrated Eid. I'm estranged from my family, so I haven't really celebrated Eid in 12 years or something like that. And then a couple of years ago, I decided that I was going to reclaim it for myself, to see, I guess, kind of like how Christmas is a sort of, it's got Christ in the name, so it's clearly comes from those roots, but has been sort of secularized in this kind of way.
Like
so I have
an
been
R&E Muslim.
Sorry,
like an R&E Muslim, Ramadan and Eid.
There you go. Yeah, one of those. Basically, yeah. And so I've been trying to figure out how to kind of create some version of this that is for sort of, it sort of hits in the same way and taps all of those buttons that were put into you from childhood about the excitement about Eid. And I would get new clothes and every Eid, and I would always look forward to that, and sort of, and the feasting, of course, and trying to figure out how I can make that happen, sort of for myself and my sort of found family, my communities, have been really, they've stepped up. Even people who don't celebrate Eid remembered that it was an important day for me, that they've reached out and did Zoom calls and just even said Eid Mubarak, which was very sweet. So some of them whose first language is their first language is English, they've never learned any other language, learned how to say Mubarak, which was just absolutely very sweet. So I definitely I definitely wanted to underline the importance of community in these holidays, because as somebody who struggles with that, that's really, really important. And I'm going to get old one day, and I hope people remember me on holidays as well. So thank you for sharing that, Anna-Malie. Are there any other Eid traditions people want to discuss?
Yeah, I know, like, especially growing, like, my childhood thing was there was this, because there's like 3 days in Eid, at least the way we would celebrate it. We basically had open houses. So day one family would have the open house, and for some reason we were always the day two family. So everyone, including the kids, and it was more like at the time with the community we were, it was like a block party more like, because we were all fairly close to each other within like 2 or 3 buildings. So all the kids would gather under the building to play cricket, and I would be the only one dressed in like the frilliest of frilly outfits and like all this costume jewelry my mom would put on me. And you'd kind of see, if you wanted to look for me, you just had to follow the trail of jewelry and various accessories falling off as I'm just going and playing with everyone. And yeah, that sort of open house, like it's similar to that community mosque thing, but it was more like families. And that's something I do miss a lot. And
yeah, one thing that we've missed out on this year and the year before is similar to what you're saying. There's different houses holding different events, and with us, we would visit maybe 3 or 4 houses in a row just to go and say Eid Mubarak to different people and different sides of the family. But then after you visit the multiple houses, the funny part is the people that you miss because the scheduling of who visits what house just didn't overlap. And then it's like, why didn't I see you this Eid? Where were you? Why are you hiding? No, we went to this. Well, I went to this and I didn't see you. So then it's like this game of tag. And then our family has this one house that is mainly used for gathering, and we just call it the crowded house because there's always people coming and going. And obviously with COVID, that is not an option. And so you'd go there and you would just expect not just this mass of children that you no longer recognize because there's just more of them every year and they just keep growing up, but also you just have different parts of the family that you end up always huddled up together as coffee is passed around. So that's just something that's been missed.
Yeah. I think
also,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say also one very random thing is do not watch like a revenge horror movie during Eid al-Adha. Just don't.
Oh yeah, don't do that.
Because as in the movie people were getting offed, that's also when the bags of the sacrifices started coming in garbage bags and sort of human size, and I freaked out that particular Eid because that was the only thing on TV and all the kids were sitting down and watching that movie. I don't know why they thought it was appropriate for kids, but there you go.
So remember, children, we as adults don't think you should watch scary movies on Eid. I bet you'll follow that to the letter.
Well, so speaking of fiction, this might be as good a segue as any. And I know that Isa has been very patient. I hope this has been reasonably entertaining, as I know you don't celebrate Eid. And
I'm perfectly happy to sit here and listen and enjoy all your stories.
Yeah, it's a time of joy, and I'm glad that you seem to be enjoying it too. Some of these stories, and so, but let's dig into how we can go about incorporating sort of cultural or religious events in games. Do you just sort of take the same thing and stick it right into your tabletop role-playing game, or do you fictionalize it, or do you come up with entirely new ones that have no relation to existing ones? So, just general thoughts about how to incorporate or take inspiration from real world events.
I mean, oh God, I'm terrible. My first thought is honestly, you should just have a list of tables. One theme, like sacrifice, harvest, the moon, and then the second one, another table full of things to do. So like candles, or feasting, or I don't know, a maypole. Put some Western stuff in there, and then just roll and see what happens.
No more tables. No more tables.
Listen, I am now a certified game designer. I'm speaking to the OSR community.
So
Very much love my info.
We're gonna have a maple of sacrifice in
Yes.
which you dance
I'll
on.
join the chant on no more tables.
You dance in red to acknowledge the sacrifice of your people and their struggles, because finally you're now free. There you go. Made something up. Believe it or not, tables do help in inspiring sort of like last minute inspirations, especially when you're like doing fantasy and you have cultural festivals that only exist for one village. You can really make whatever you want up. When it comes to getting inspired by real things, I think, especially if acknowledging that a lot of the tabletop media we see and is made usually for, at least first, the West, it is hard for me to say, hey, just take Eid, scratch the serial numbers off and use that in the way many people do with Christmas, because there simply isn't enough representations of what Eid could look like to come up with something that feels not authentic, but warm enough to match what we actually experience. You have to do a lot of homework.
The other thing with Eid is that, you know, like how you can have midwinter festival and all of that stuff that's kind of Christmas, but also like midwinter festival, which is what it originally was. With Eid, you really have to, like, there's no season tied to it because it goes through all the seasons. So you really have to think about what is the essence of Eid. And the thing is that it's different from each community and culture. So if you have an Eid tradition, work into it. And more often than not, it is more secular than it is religious. The religious part is the praying and certain things you must do, but everything else is very much community and cultural. It's like food and make merry.
And
then
charity.
And things like, and charity. And you know, like like Safia's traditions, how to take as much money as you can off of your elders. That sounds quite crude, but
yeah, that to me as a kid, that was all I remembered about Eid, and that was the strategy. As an adult, you start to realize, yeah, there's way more than that. It's just I was blinded by the candy.
Yeah,
we should have like a game where we're all children and we're trying to make bank for Eid.
Oh my god.
I'm actually going to be running a one-shot for my community that's about little kids staying at grandma's throughout Ramadan, and the goal being whoever gets the most points with grandma gets the bigger idea. So
I feel like that could also be a really good use for the Wandering Cousins table, like which cousin's going to come through the door and like mess up all your plans.
Takes your Edie.
This reminds me very harshly of back when I first joined, and I recommended the does your family show up and decide to ruin your visit to this village?
Yeah.
Roll.
Oh yeah, you have to have at least 1d6 family members ruining whatever plan you have.
1d6 family
Yes.
Look, it could be 1, it could be 6, who knows?
Well, so on that point, let's hear from the no tables crowd. How would you like to create holidays? Using your imagination?
I know, right? I don't hate tables that much. It's just that D&D has too many of them. I think like something I like to think about, and this usually ends up being tied to like when I create a location that my character is from or something, I usually try to come up with like some kind of thing that makes that place special and unique to that character, that then adds something unique into the world that I'm going to end up playing in with the other players. So if I'm thinking of something like a cultural or religious festival, it'll usually be thinking of like a reason for that festival to exist. And then maybe tying it to something to do with the environment that that place sits in. So like if it's somewhere, for example, one of the places I've made up for a game was like a city on top of a mesa in a very like deserty, hot, arid place. So I decided that their main cultural festival took place at night, because that meant that everyone could be out more comfortably in the cool, and then they could do cool things with like lights and fire and stuff, because that was like a big theme in that made up location. And then in another one, it was for a character who was more of like a Greek themed thing, and she worships Dionysus. And so I kind of tied a lot of those kinds of things into the place that she was from, and sort of, yeah, took some inspiration from some of the stuff I'd read about like ancient Greek mythology and the Maenads and how people worship Dionysus, but also thought about like, you know, where these people live, which happen to be in the middle of like a very dense forest and quite a secluded community. So it's more about like the interpersonal connections between each of those people, rather than something like big and flashy, for example. So yeah, I just like to create sort of like stuff that's specifically tied to the place that it's in. I think is always quite fun.
That's a very good point. And I think you've also highlighted something that I wanted to point out, which is Adam and Lee, of course, brought in a very important perspective of a game designer trying to create a game that will appeal to a broad range of people. And, you know, within that, that's the case. But then there's the perspective of, you know, if you're creating your own character, so you can kind of do the thing that you feel is sort of that you feel comfortable with. But the other thing I wanted to point out here is that in the sort of middle, I guess, of authorial power, the GM has this ability to look at their players and go, okay, all of these players are of Muslim backgrounds. Yes, I could actually just have Eid. It would be handled respectfully, and it is tied in enough to their emotional systems, because they've got that history and with that sort of religion specifically, that it will mean something for all of their characters to celebrate Eid. And it'll be like running a Christmas session of a game for a bunch of people who are, you know, who celebrate Christmas or Hanukkah and so forth as well. So, you know, reading the audience, very important. I don't think that there's sort of any one prescription that can cover all cases or anything like that. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, to build on what you're mentioning about reading the audience, that is a big part. Like, if you are taking from an existing culture, what's the objective behind it? If the reason to take from a culture is to kind of play on the strings of nostalgia that your existing players have, then it's very seamless, because you don't even need to explain it. You don't need to introduce it. You're just throwing things and waiting for them to go, oh, I know what this is. And that's a very satisfying moment for everyone at the table. But if it's exploring a culture that is very different to you, to your players, then there has to be a bit more caution about how you're representing it, but also how your players are going to pick it up and understand it. Because now they will view it not by any fault, but they will view it as outsiders. And that can mean it's very easy to misrepresent or misinterpret it. So there has to be a reason why you take it from a culture. If you're already exploring a setting and your players know that this is supposed to be this culture, and you've already done your research, then it's a lot easier to slip in. But if it's a completely fantasy setting, and then you take something that's very much based on the real world, it's a little jarring. So it's the people you're playing with and how they're going to approach it, but also what you already established as what's going to be in this game.
Yeah, I don't think Eid al-Fitr specifically would fit into the world of Sahara as is. You'd have to do a lot of finagling, because we don't know if there's really a month of fasting, and there's no, the sense of community through religion is a bit lost in the world of Sahara, because there's just so many gods doing so many different things. So the perspectives are different. The other thing is, like, I never want to say, especially when it comes to something like Eid, which, yes, it's religious, but also is very, very just a festival. I don't want to say never use it. Like, if your game is set in the modern day and there are Muslims in your in your town, they're probably going to celebrate Eid. I have no problem with you saying that they're celebrating Eid and using them as a way to bring people into an introduction into what that looks like. And likewise, if you're doing a sci-fi setting set in the future, I really want you to include more religious signifiers from religions that aren't Christianity, because sci-fi is overwhelmed with Christianic influences, but very few Islamic influences.
Also, don't call it a lunar festival, because then it gets very confusing.
There's so many lunar festivals, though. There's like every week. It's like there's a new phase of the moon like every day. What's with that?
Make up your mind, Moon. So as someone who isn't religious and wasn't raised religious, so I would like to ask you, for example, you say like you would like games and GMs to include more like religious and cultural signifiers of like non-Christianity, which I absolutely agree with. So for example, do you think it would be fun, appropriate, etc., to use some kind of like background flavor, like you're out walking in the neighborhood tonight, it's Eid, so you notice that like these particular groups of people are like celebrating in this particular way, as like a nice sort of setting at the beginning of a story or something? Or would you want it to be more like interwoven?
I mean, I love
That's a great idea.
Izzy, you just made me so happy. I'm sorry. No, that was emotional. I love both. I love both.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
In the same way as like, oh, sorry.
I was also
Isa
gonna
first.
say
Sorry, Miriam first, then Isa, and then Amelie. Sorry, just stepping in as facilitator.
Yeah. So, just stepping just a little away from religion as well, is there's a lot of seasonal non-Christian events that happen, like the Bengali New Year, which is actually really tied to a community and not any religion. And the Bengali New Year also coincides with a lot of other community New Years. And there's different ways of showing that out. And then even harvest festivals, for example. Durga Puja is a very big example of one type of harvest festival, as well as Navratri is also another one. Like and I'm just taking it from South Asian cultures. There's many more. There's East Asian, Southeast Asian. I'm sure there's also something in Western Asia. And Nowruz, I realized I just mangled it. Nowruz, that's also another festival that's Persian. And there's all these events that you can use to show a festival that is non-Christian and non-European, and also show a signifying change of season or setting what season everyone is in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's actually similar to what I was going to say, was sort of elaborating on the point I mentioned before of like, you know, if you want to set the idea of it being a particular season in a game, you might say like, oh, you notice that there are like old jack-o'-lanterns in the street, and then people know it's sort of like November, like early November time, and sort of using stuff that isn't like what we would typically see, in order to signify something like what season this game is taking place in or whatever.
Yeah.
And Sophia, please. Sorry, Amelie, if that's okay.
No, Sophia first, please.
Okay, sorry. I think, as I mentioned, maybe starting a scene with a celebration can be a really good way to get your players to experience whatever setting they're in. And what's great about that is you can easily play up a lot of small details really quickly, and that immediately sets out a setting. So if a celebration at the core is all about, say, giving thanks to God, or say celebrating family or blessings, then you could find all the little details and pepper them through that your players can pick up on, and that just makes it a celebration that they are surrounded by, even if they're not necessarily partaking it. But it immediately they know the world they're in, and they kind of can understand this. And you can use passive insights, such as a way, or passive abilities overall, to have characters pick up and understand what this is as part of an exploration.
Oh, that's a very good point. Amelie, please.
There's ways to also include like your players even beyond that by giving them tokens that represent their connection to their community. So like if it is I'm trying to think of something for Eid. If it is for Eid and their children, one of them could just have like a pocket that's a bit more bulging than the rest, because that kid went around collecting earlier today. And if with your consent from your players, you can always add them to the culture without having them have to represent the culture. And obviously things are different if it's a streamed game versus a private one. And it's different whether you're trying to educate someone versus you're just trying to elaborate on things. But there's tons of things you can do. Daniel actually brought up an interesting point that there is a version of sci-fi using Arabian myth as its background called Coriolis. And Daniel specifically is a huge fan of Coriolis. I played it. It's not necessarily Muslim, but it is Arabian. And I don't know if I can recommend its storytelling just yet because I haven't read through the entire book, but that alone has drawn a lot of people in. I see a lot of fans of Coriolis out there. I see a lot of people who are diehard fans of Coriolis, which kind of indicates that if we did more to diversify our sources, whether or not it's any individual source is good, the diversity alone draws people in more than you'd expect. Because a lot of people like to play with their imagination, or they like to find a world that's so drastically different from theirs that they have to set this world aside as they walk in. You know, play around with themes rather than feel stuck to one group that maybe has been a bit overplayed. Just be cautious, right? That's all.
If I may interject, I think one thing that's interesting about Coriolis, I don't necessarily actually play in the world of Coriolis all that often. I enjoy the system a lot, and I recently started playing one of their pre-written modules. I think what's interesting about Coriolis is that they use religion in general, and this is more of a world-building note. They use religion in general to actually frame the state of the world as the players are experiencing it for the first time. So there are different religious factions, and they talk about how, religion factors into the everyday life of people, or how it can factor into the everyday life of people, which is something like that I noticed. And I'm curious about, you folks, what your thoughts are on this. I've noticed that D&D does this rather poorly. Religion is something I always say we compare to D&D because D&D is kind of like the standard that people approach this community with. And it's that, religion in D&D is often a tool for the players to do something. It's a tool for the players to wield power. It's a tool for the players to, go on adventures. But one thing that D&D doesn't really talk about is how religion actually sort of, you gotta say, factors into the world of the Forgotten Realms, right? Religion, in many cases, like you folks have pointed out on the Al-Qadim reads, and we've kind of talked about a bit on the Karatur stuff or Oriental Adventures, religion is often used to actually other people, create this sort of exotic or mystical other. Whereas in its D&D sort of Western setting, religion is there as a tool for power. But it's not really a part of life there. It's not really a part of the everyday existence of the people there, even though these gods are very much real to these folks. They're a part of their life. They channel them for power. There are churches, there are temples, there are cults. But nobody really talks about the state of religion or religious practice and belief in D&D. So I'm curious as to what you folks would do in that sort of case.
Okay. I really want to speak now because I'm probably going to give a very terrible example, but it's an example that I wrote. So I probably should mention it. For those who do not follow me on Twitter, you might not know that I wrote for Jiangxi Blood on the Banquet Hall. Blood in the Banquet Hall. I'm I was not a stretch goal writer per se, but I wrote a scenario nonetheless. I was asked to beef up the book after it successfully passed its Kickstarter goals. I was very proud to do so. Jiangxi deals a lot with racist and racist themes. So I had a choice. I was part of me wanted to write something really silly, and part of me was I could make this about what it felt like to be a Muslim in the aftermath of 9/11. I chose the latter. And there is a prayer mechanic as such that I wrote in. I specifically made it for the book. And it is quite simple. It is, if you choose to pray in this moment, what are you feeling right now? And what are you thinking about? If you feel that that is satisfactory, if you feel that is calming, you clear one bad monk card a monk card is kind of like, it blocks up your ability to do something. You clear up one bad monk card. If not, the opposite happens. And then specifically because of the setting, it is specifically mentioned you might not want to pray in front of outsiders. There's also a way to do it with dice, because I know some people love dice, but the first response was, here's a way to represent what prayer can be to people, not just Islamic prayer, but prayer, in the sense that it really helps center sometimes without it necessarily being such a huge mechanic that it's about power, because that's a very Western perception of things. It's not that religion and prayer has not provided magic in the past. No one's saying that. There's examples all throughout history and religious text. However, it's a minority of many religions, that kind of magical power. Really, the majority is about finding ways to connect their community, finding ways to center, and finding ways to honor what you believe is the right thing to do in your day-to-day life. It's one of the reasons why so many gods are connected to family and home and hearth, etc. It's often about feeling connected to your fellow humans through God. I think it's a one common thread through many, many religious cultures.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's often what I see as being sort of missing a lot of the times. Exactly what you said is like the more personal aspect of a faith or cultural practice. And I guess I understand why maybe that happens, because in, say, like a source book or whatever, you're thinking more of like the broad strokes of the world. But I do think that introducing aspects like, you know, kind of like the stories that some of you guys have been saying today about like the more kind of like smaller quirks of like practices that come out of those festivals that sort of children take part in and then adults know of it when they get older and stuff like that, like more like interpersonal, smaller scale stuff, I think really adds like a lot of depth and flavor and color to that kind of thing when you're introducing it in a game.
Mm-hmm.
I think.
And
Go ahead.
Okay, no need for the Canadian standoff, Sophia, please, and then
right. I really think that that's a great point, that how in a lot of games, religion is a source of power and not much else. But really at the core, if you want to have a player go through an experience of religion and a connection to God, it really should be about, what is this faith about and what is it preaching? What are the commandments of it? And how can this character go through placing these commandments and this way of life in their adventures? How do they keep it in their frame of mind when a decision comes that challenges them? How do they still work through it? And that really should be the elements that your player goes through when they're trying to represent a following with a god, even a fictional one, because that is part of what a religious person would go through in their daily life. And also building on what, as I mentioned, putting together the values that find their way into daily life and traditions, because every religion comes with its daily, weekly, or monthly traditions or so on. Now, how do you do that if you're in the middle, if you spent an entire 3 days or a week in a dungeon? So your character might miss these things or might find ways to make them happen because it's how they feel connected. And so it's this little nuance that kind of would bring a religion to life and not make it as, oh, I have this god because I'm a cleric.
good point. How do you?
Yeah, so y'all know I'm a very loosey-goosey GM, and that you will never learn how to actually play a game if you ever play any game with me or watch any game I run. And like, it's, for me, it's very simple thing of, if you don't want to mechanize it because it becomes a little icky, just don't. And if you do, think about why you want to do it. It's I'm trying to get the proper words for it, but it's just one of those things where sometimes, because the perception of D&D is there are mechanics and there are rules and roles, and I want to roll dice, so we got to do it. And yes, you should if that's what you want to do, but you don't have to. And sometimes it's just nice to collaborative storytelling and build a world together and build these traditions and build these stuff together as a table.
Mhm.
I'm like a bit reminded of two things. One, the fact that you're not anything close to a bad GM when it comes to teaching shit, because the Monster of the Week game you run is pretty fantastic and you adequately explore what Monster of the Week can do. The other thing is that when it comes to the biggest problem, I think, when it comes to mechanizing is so rarely do you see what's beyond the mechanics, right? It kind of reminds me of one of the people in the chat mentioned Sufism, but like I think it's something that's actually really missing from D&D is the Sufism. It's the mysticism. It's a bunch of like really old people sitting in a circle just debating really fine points of text. Where's that? Where's what makes a religion a religion? Because it's not just praying to something and having something happen, or even having nothing happen. Prayer is a small part of religion. Religion is often guidelines to help communities grow. Usually that's one of the reasons why they were built the way they were built. It's one of the reasons why sometimes when you look in old books, the rules seem a bit off. It's because they were made for communities at that time. That kind of thing. And those are the things that are most often missing. The other thing is that I'm like trying to think about it, and I literally can't think of any evil gods in the real world. I mean, doubtless a few exist, but not evil gods as in evil gods, but like evil gods that are actively worshipped and prayed to. Because the few that I think of that most people call evil, like Serket in the Egyptian pantheon, is not evil whatsoever. She just gets misinterpreted as that because we now associate a lot of the things she's represented with evil. Not that she was evil back then. I find that weird in D&D. Like there's active worship of evil gods when that doesn't make sense. Morality is not hugely a thing everywhere, but yeah, that's strange.
All y'all are making such good points. I keep nodding, but that's super bad for my nausea. Isa, so we've talked about D&D because of course it is the 800-pound gorilla in the room, but you have a lot of experience with sort of more rules light games like Quest and so forth.
Mhm.
How would you see these being incorporated into not D&D?
I mean, I think the great thing about Quest in particular is that it is so open, and so it gives a lot of scope for people to be able to create their own ideas of religious and cultural practices, which is what I found, especially while playing the streamed game that I play in, is that all our characters have ended up coming from very different places with very particular practices and aesthetics and cultures. And yeah, I think that really, like what Adam Ali mentioned about how religion is so often tied to cultural practice and like necessity, in its origin of like, you know, the reason there are certain maybe like dietary restrictions and stuff is literally because of like necessity that was born out of the time and the place that those rules were created in. And then over time it becomes a cultural practice that is continued on for religious reasons. And those are the kinds of things I think are really fun and interesting to think about when you're creating something for yourself. Like you don't necessarily have to lift them straight out of something in the real world, especially if that's going to end up being something problematic. But like, yeah, it's the personal, smaller, everyday side of religion that often is missed in these games where they have a pantheon that all have things associated with them. And I think rules light games allow people to kind of create their own thing, which can be very beneficial. Certainly bad things can be done with that. But I've found that it's been very beneficial because you take away the expectation that there will be a pantheon where there is, you know, a god of the storms, a god of this, a god of that. And it allows a bit more freedom with it, I think.
Very good points. So we've kind of discussed about how, like, the range of how to incorporate these things, up from how you should do it sort of as a conceptual level down to sort of mechanically. What are some things you really shouldn't do for incorporating religious or cultural events into your tabletop role-playing games?
I think a really big thing not to do is not to take an existing religion at exactly as it is, and then use many of its practices and flavor it for an evil being or an evil god or an evil religion or evil people. I think that's a very obvious don't do that, whether consciously or subconsciously. It might be that popular media makes it seem like it's acceptable to do, but it isn't.
Also lazy design.
Like, I think specifically, I really do want to call out the specifics of sacrifice and animal sacrifice. Our perceptions of it have changed since, bygone eras, but regardless, many people saw it as returning to the ground what you took from it. There's many stories around that. We don't have the time for it, but animal sacrifice specifically, and how apparently it leads to human sacrifice, even though that was a very rare thing, is one of those things that get misinterpreted in a lot of Western religious fiction. And it can cause some serious damage. Like, for Muslims, that's one day out of the year. It's not really that big of a deal. But there are practices out there, especially certain indigenous practices, that still acknowledge the importance of these things. So don't. I feel like I need to put a hard don't there.
Yeah.
I think also tied to that, to what all of you have just said, is the idea of placing particular morality upon particular types of religious practices, viewing them through the lens of those being the outsider practices, and that often gets put upon things like religious practices to do with sacrifice, religious practices that are more tied to certain parts of the world than others, and sort of superimposes a particular morality and lens upon it, where it is very much like, we the Westerners viewing this other culture that is in that part of the world over there in a negative light, which has very horrible connotations.
All roads come back to Edward Said's Orientalism. It sounds like, yep. Sorry, Maria.
Yeah.
And also, just don't use very important words that mean certain things and throw it in a game. Like jihad, looking at you really, really hard, vampire.
I'm the vampire
Really?
fanboy here. We can talk ages.
Yes. Yep.
Oh my god.
It's a huge major part of the overall world lore, jihad, which is like a holy war or something of that sort.
It's struggle, maybe.
It's not really a holy war. It's more of a ideological war, and it's also tied with Gehenna, which is no, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, this is not the time.
This is not the jihad episode.
I'm sorry.
Well, that's something that came up in our reading of Al-Qadim as well. I now cannot remember what the words were, but there were specific words that I remember Ahmed pulled out as being like, they shouldn't have used these words because they are tied to like a particular title that has a relevance in the real world, in the real religion.
I think it's like
just threw them in there.
Imam.
That was it. Yeah.
Imam is something that I don't think should be included. I think if you're going to be creating a fantasy religion, why not take the opportunity to make up your own titling?
Yep.
Yeah.
Honestly, do the short form and just use the words for parent. Too many of us did that. Just go ahead, take it. Use that.
All right. Well, with those advised warnings, we can, I think, bring this session to a close. Thank you so much for your contributions. Especially thank you to Adam Ali and Safia for the great ideas about how to proceed with this. But of course, also thank you to Mariam and Iza for your contributions. Very valuable. I also, so if we could just go around in order, introduce ourselves again, or where people can find you. And then if you want to also mention any projects or anything that you're working on that you're looking forward to getting out there. So let's start with Mariam, please.
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at media_junkie. That's where you'll find out all the stuff I'm doing. I write for tabletop games, and I stream, and I podcast, and in particular, I am currently running season 2 of Kahania on Utopia, where we have a guest player who may or may not be in the stream. Playing a very mysterious character, but I will let that person describe themselves later. And also the Musafir season 2 is coming out. There have been some kinks that have been happening where I couldn't get the episode of Meet the Cast out, but it should be coming out pretty soon now that life is slowly getting a little better. And yeah, that's me.
Oh, wonderful. Iza, please.
Hey, I'm Iza. If you want to find more of what I do, you can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Evil Clever Dog. I also have a YouTube channel that's also called Evil Clever Dog. I make videos about cosplay and making and designing cool things, and I just put out a video where I made the Raven Clan shield from Assassin's Creed Valhalla, if you want to go and check that out. I also do a bunch of TTRPG streaming on Mondays over on Chromatic Chimera. I play in Quest, the Soaring City. That is at 11:30 p.m. BST, 6:30 p.m. EST, and on Fridays on twitch.tv/finthebin at 10 p.m. GMT, I play in a Spire campaign called Downfall. So yeah, lots of fun RPG stuff. And also on, as we said earlier, on May the 22nd, you can find me and Sophia over on Satine Phoenix's Twitch channel playing in a D&D one-shot at 10 a.m. PDT, 6 p.m. BST. Having to remember all these numbers, bad for a dyscalculic.
And when do you sleep?
I don't know.
You know, you just said you're getting back to like work.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're gonna find the time with all this going on, but I'm glad to hear it. Adam Ali, please.
Hey, wow, I forgot all the things. My pronouns are he, him. You can find me online at Werewolf Feels. Like Iza, apparently I'm canine branded. You can find whatever's going on with me there. I actually, if you go to the description, there's a link. You'll find nerdnalikadir.car.co. That's got the link of literally everything I'm doing right now, or have done, almost have done. For the big things, yes, I'll be on Kahania. That's me playing. Oh, yeah, I can do that. Playing Uman, I think he might be a fire god. It's pretty cool.
Not
Is it pretty
god.
cool?
Divine being.
Yeah, the divinity. He's a really cool character. I'm very glad to play him. It's only for the month of May. 1 episode's up, 1 episode to go, and that'll be it. So who knows what's going to happen next? He's a chosen playbook, and if any of you know Monster of the Week, it probably means death. The other things that are up, if you like the idea of me playing a game, you can check me out Mondays, 7 p.m. EDT for Gehenna Gaming's Monster Hearts stream. Every Monday, it's Monster Hearts Monday. We have an all POC group of people playing in a very horror-filled university. We're actually being chased by a serial killer right now, so that'll be great. If you like horror, I recommend you check out my podcast, the podcast that I'm in, I should say. Every Friday, there's a new episode, but only for the next 5 Fridays. We just had one out, 5 more to go. We're reaching the end of Missing Annie Lee, and woof, it's getting difficult. Oh, it's a dog. And I'm also in a Kickstarter. Right, let me put the link in the chat. Look at the chat. That's a Kickstarter I'm in. It just funded, but if you would like to fund us more, that'd be great. It's the Monster Hearts thing. Monster Hearts mini settings, wonderful. Horror, yes. And last but not least, I will be. Oh my God, his neckerchief. I will be joining along with Miriam to the Roll for Solidarity series of panels that's going to be happening over on Transplanar RPGs Twitch channel. It is super exciting. We're going to be, it's members from the Asian community and members from the Black community, and we're going to be sitting down and talking about the ways in which we exhibit solidarity, the ways in which we take care of ourselves, and the way we, have joy. That's going to be one of the focuses. So I'm in 2 panels. I'm modding for a panel called Curating Comfort Caring. That's the name. I'm sure of it. 3 C's. And represent Nerd Life. I'll be a panelist. I'm looking very much forward to it. But I've also been part of helping things set up behind the scenes. So I'm also very proud of it. And I look forward to getting the show on the road. That is next week, Wednesday and Thursday. See you there.
Awesome. Maria, was that?
That was the same thing. I'm on a panel that's called Not Your Model Minority.
Ah, fantastic. Okay, Sophia, if you could introduce your puppy, and then I guess also tell us about yourself, if you want.
Okay, so I'll start with the puppy. So that was Kenny. He's a Havanese. And regarding the neckerchief, he's refusing to let us take it off. He's decided that this is his fashion choice. If we remove it, he will yell at us until someone puts it back. So it's staying on for the foreseeable future.
No choice but to stand.
No.
I'm sorry, I'm one of those men who cry over dogs. I apologize.
Wonderful.
And as for me, I'm Sophia. I have a community that is based within Saudi Arabia, namely within the Eastern Province, called the Crossroads Guild. And I'm also a writer, a fantasy fiction writer. And I'm currently running a pretty cool survey with my friend Ahmad, hoping to get as much information as we can about how tabletop gaming is played and what is popular and what are our habits all across the Middle East and North Africa. So if you're a resident or a national, or if you identify with the region, please take the survey. And we hope to share results by country as well as by nationality, and just, hey, let's learn how the game happens here.
Mm-hmm. And please definitely do the survey if you qualify, and share this with other people as well, because more information on this kind of stuff is really important. So that's great work. Thank you. My name is Amar Ijaz. My pronouns are he, him. I am one of the co-hosts of Asians Represent, and I'm one of the cast members in Dungeons.Asians. You can find that stream on the Asians Represent podcast stream as well. I want to give a shout out to Daniel. Daniel has been producing, and of course joined in with his wonderful insights about D&D and the cultural and religious events. Thank you. You can watch previous episodes of Critical Read on the Asians Represent YouTube channel, this will also drop, I believe, on Wednesday. So you can just search for Asians Represent in YouTube. That's the easiest way to get it. We're hoping to be back to our regularly scheduled programming, which is we're working through the Al-Qadim supplement for Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to be, discussing sort of the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's on the 3rd Saturday of every month, and so the next one should be on this Twitch for Asians Represent, twitch.tv/AZNSRep on Saturday, June 19th at 12 Eastern. Thank you so much for joining. Eid Mubarak to those who celebrate, and thank you so much to the panelists for coming in and share your perspectives. This was fantastic. Have a good day.